Hello, and welcome to the Path of Most Persistence. This is a place where we hear and share tenacious stories of overcoming obstacles with our partners who dare to share a bit of their own personal paths. Sabrina Garcia is a project manager for Chevron. After graduating from high school as valedictorian of her class, she attended the University of Texas at Austin, where she earned a degree in honors psychology and a French minor. Sabrina is focused on developing her professional skills and personal growth. Sabrina, it is so wonderful to have you here with me today.
I am very happy to be here. Thank you for the invitation.
How's your day been so far?
It's been good. I got to see my little brother and his fiance. Got some work done this morning, found a cute little coffee shop.
Nice.
It's been a successful day so far.
I'm glad. I'm so glad to hear that. I have Sabrina here with us today because Sabrina is exceptional. Sabrina has always been very academically minded ever since you were just a little one. You've had some really great accomplishments I want to talk about today, but also because we're developing a program for March to celebrate International Women's Day. We've created a program that you're going to be contributing to, Profiles in Persisterhood. And I think, maybe I'm wrong, but it seems as though you've had some interest in that area, in persisterhood of sorts. So maybe we can get to that in the conversation as well.
Awesome.
Okay. But I want to start off with a person that graduated with an honors psychology degree and a minor in French. How did you get to Chevron and become a project manager?
It's a great question. I got really lucky and ended up in my initial role. I was essentially a glorified customer service representative. My official title was support specialist. I just got really lucky, got an interview, and was selected, and had to move in the middle of my last semester of college, which was very challenging. But after doing that for about a year, I again got very lucky and met someone who, with whom I really clicked, and we had a lot in common, specifically like extracurricular interests. Her name is Daria, and whenever this technical project got started up, she named me as the person who she felt would be a good colleague and co-project manager with her. So even though I didn't have any tech background, I ended up in this position and had to learn a lot on the fly in order to get to a place where I could manage numerous teams to complete this project that we're working on. So it's definitely been a big learning experience for me, but I'm really happy that I ended up in tech. It's very interesting, and I think it's a good opportunity for me to continue to grow in my professional life.
You mentioned one word in all of that I zeroed in on. You said lucky. You were lucky. Do you believe in luck? Do you think that's what it was for you, is just pure luck?
That is a very challenging question, one that I've grappled with a lot.
Let's talk. This is the place to talk about it, so let's talk about luck.
I have a lot of people in my life who are in positions where they don't feel appreciated, and how much effort she's put into developing her professional life, and applying to jobs and just seeking new opportunities. And even though she's an exceptional person, a very hard worker, she's not getting, maybe the responses that I think she deserves. And when I think about my experience with applying for jobs, I got really lucky. I was able to get my foot in the door, which I think is one of the biggest reasons people are given opportunities, because they have a connection. And a lot of the time it's not, I don't know if I want to say it's not fair, but I think some people are in more of a position that gives them room to succeed than others. And so to answer your question, I think, believe in luck. But I also think that things kind of happen for a reason and pan out the way they do because they were meant to.
Okay, so it's a blend. It's a
blend, yeah.
Okay. Because there are some that say luck, there are people that really believe luck is luck. It's just circumstance, it just happens, it's kismet, it just happens.
Right.
But there are others that say luck is really about preparedness and the opportunity just merging.
Right.
So for young people, or maybe just adults in whatever area or level of their professional career, what do you say to someone that is feeling unlucky right now? How do you encourage someone that is lacking luck?
I think it's really important to never give up. It is really easy to want to start to give up when you are trying and trying and trying and nothing seems to be panning out. But I think the harder of the two and the one that shows more resilience is continuing on and keep being going, I guess. Persevering, for lack of a better word. Yes, persisting. And I think that that's true in all aspects of life and work, in like your professional life, like problem solving. If something's wrong and you can't figure out the solution, you keep trying. You go from different angles, but you keep trying to achieve your goal. But I think that that's something that a lot of people, including myself, struggle with, feeling hopeless or like you'll never get what you want or you'll never achieve your goal. But it's really important to just persevere and keep going even when it feels like there's no light at the end of the tunnel.
So when you say those things, it opens up so many more questions that I have for you. If someone were to not know you, but to see your resume, as folks will, or your CV or your bio, whatever we post when this video is released, they're going to look at your accomplishments and go, oh my goodness, she is obviously academically minded, she is high achieving, appears on paper, she's accomplished everything she's probably wanted. Look at her. Her life has been perfect. It's been easy. So you mentioned having to persist yourself. So for those, again, that not knowing you and not understanding the journeys that you've been on and the persistence that you've had to acquire, to get through, and to achieve all the things that are on your CV, where do you regain strength to persist? How is that? Because for most people, it's hills and valleys, right? You feel strong some days and you've got it. And other days in persisting, it's just not that easy. So where do you go? How do you re-strengthen yourself to continue to persist?
I have realized in the last couple of months that I really rely on my social circle and my support system whenever I feel like I might be struggling, specifically a few close friends, my parents, my family. I would not be where I am today without them. Just the thought of potentially going through something and not being able to pick up the phone and call my best friend or my mom or my dad is very frightening to me. And I feel very fortunate in that aspect because I do have a big family and I do have parents who support me. But it's definitely, without them, I would not have achieved any of the things that I have been able to achieve so far in my life. They're very important to me and who I am and what I've been able to do so far.
That's important. And thank you for sharing that, because it's easy to prejudge individuals by their accomplishments on paper, or to see them and think, oh, she's got it all together or he's got it all together. And I wonder sometimes, and especially for our audience, For some individuals, persistence comes easily. They have a strong network. Some do not. And I just wonder, I like to always ask our guests, is it something that can be taught? Is it something that you're just born with? Do you acquire it over the battles, through the scars that you obtain? So do you feel, for those listening in or those that don't have the networks that you do or don't have that natural grit, persistence, can it be taught? Can it be learned?
The psychologist in me is going to come out a little bit. I think there's a nature and a nurture aspect to every characteristic that a person has. I think that anything can be taught, but there's also something inherent in a person that maybe makes them a little more predisposed to succeed at something versus struggle with it a little bit more. So I do think that it can be taught, but in order to learn things like that, how to persevere, you have to have obstacles. So if you are in a position in your life where you've never, had to struggle for something or work really hard for something, as an adult, you might find that you want to quit every time something gets difficult. So I think it's really important to fail early on in life, because that's how you learn to persevere and be persistent, and to get what you want. But I do think that it can be taught. It's a conscious effort for sure.
And a very uncomfortable one.
Very uncomfortable. Yes, absolutely.
That's good to hear. And going a little bit further, again, in preparation for our chat today, looking at your CV, you did quite a bit of research. And it's really intriguing, and there's a constant or a consistent tone, a topic that I see through your research. Do you want to talk about your research, what you've learned, what maybe is an enduring concept that stays with you, or you've maybe even something that you've hoped you were able to accomplish but you didn't or haven't yet?
Yeah. So whenever I transitioned from engineering into psychology, my first intro to psych class, someone came up and made an announcement that the sexual psychophysiology laboratory was looking for research assistants. And I thought, what better way to learn about psychology and figure out if this is something that I want to pursue than working in a research lab. I was selected, even though this lab is one of the more desirable at UT. The psychology program at UT is very competitive. So a lot of the psychologists there are world-renowned experts in their field. So I was very fortunate to be selected to work in this lab under a psychologist named Cindy Meston. And her work surrounds non-consensual sexual experiences, and the graduate student that I worked with specifically looked at childhood sexual abuse. So a lot of the research that I participated in, that I was involved with, like data collection and stuff like that, surrounded childhood sexual abuse. But some of the other graduate students in the lab focused on other things like relationships, or like sexual arousal was a big one. So it was a very niche area, but I found it to be something very worthwhile in exploring and doing research on, just because I think that's something that people who experience, don't always report that, and often struggle with the repercussions of those experiences for the rest of their lives. And that is a really good example of something that could set you back and make you want to quit or feel discouraged, and really just affect you very negatively. And so the whole point of like doing research on things like that is to develop treatments, which is really important for anyone who experiences a non-consensual sexual experience, to do whatever you can to, I don't want to say move on with your life, but deal with that in a healthy way and overcome it so that you can live a happy and fulfilling life after something like that.
That and hopefully to if you have any links to share that for those that maybe are listening in to this conversation, that if those that or maybe are looking for help, for looking for
Yeah.
assistance, if you can share any of those resources, we'd be happy to attach them.
Yeah, absolutely.
So please. But I'm wondering, with all that amount of research, and again, I have such an appreciation for lifelong learning, continuing education throughout one's life. But I think especially for someone that does research, and it's so, like you use the word niche, but for someone that is studying something so specific, you gain so much information. And I'm wondering, although was very specific, how does that ripple throughout your life? How does this new knowledge in this very specific area, how does it change other unrelated areas of your life? Does it have a ripple effect? Does it just stay very contained? Does it change the way you maneuver through life? Because and I ask you that because I think every time for me, if it's taking a class or working on a degree, or studying something very specifically to prep for a project or whatever, I feel it changes me. Some in a very profound way, some very subtly. But I wonder, as far as a researcher with very specific topic, does it just stay in one little area that you can put in a container and off to the side, or does it transcend?
I think it's a little bit of both. I don't use my knowledge of non-consensual sexual experiences on a day-to-day basis in my current job and my role. But I think like a lot of the practices I learned, I do continue to use every day. For example, thinking analytically about something, trying to figure out the link between a cause and effect, looking at something from a scientific approach versus looking at something through a lens that might be contaminated by like pre-existing notions that you might have about something. I think it's also made a difference in like the verbiage I use and trying to be, more inclusive and more sensitive about topics like that. Not just non-consensual sexual experiences, but also things like sexual identity. Those are all very intertwined in the work that we did. So in a way, a lot of the knowledge that I have is kind of just living inside of me, that it sometimes comes out with, I'll spit out a random fact about something. But I think like the more analytical pieces of knowledge that I gained, I definitely use on a day-to-day basis.
I appreciate that, because sometimes there are those that say, or from the mindset that if you're not using your degree or what you learned, if you're in a profession or you have an occupation that is unrelated, they think that education was a waste of time. It was a waste of money. You didn't need that in the first place because you're doing this, or you could have done that. So I appreciate that you talk about how it does affect, maybe not directly,
Right.
but surely it has changed the way you look at things. And
Right.
again, your area was very specific, but there are some subtleties to it that I appreciate you sharing, because I'm from the mindset of education is wonderful no matter what it is, and it can always only enhance what we're doing. So thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering too, as your years of education and research and adaptability, because you've had this kind of academic background and you've had these types of career opportunities, do you think with every opportunity that seems so different from the last, do you think people see you differently? Do you think those around you in your circle, do you think they notice changes within you? Do you think not only do they notice, but do you think those subtleties of your change have an effect on them as well?
I think so. A really good example of this is my dad. A lot of my friends or people in my life will make comments on like the relationship that I have with my dad and how open-minded he is about certain things. And I had to explain to them, like, our relationship wasn't always this way. I had to spend significant time educating him, for lack of a better word, on various topics. And it took a lot of patience on both of our parts. But I do think that things that I've learned have kind of rippled into my relationship with him, my relationship with other people. I think as far as like whether the people in my life have noticed a change about me, I think maybe a little bit. But I do think that there are a lot of parts of myself that I've, I guess, shown throughout my entire life. But I think that those traits might have been enhanced in a way by the things that I've learned in school and at work too.
And if you don't mind, I want to go back to your relationship with your father. I don't want to, you don't have to get into the specifics of things, but I think this is important too, because there is that notion that once a parent, always a parent. You're my child. That's what it's going to be. But I think there's a beauty in allowing for that. Structure will never change because it's the biology of it. But I think there's a beauty in what you hinted to about how your relationship with him has changed over time, because you've changed. Maybe he's changed. Right. I don't know. But can you talk a little? Has that been a positive experience for you?
100%.
Okay. By spending that time, like you said, you had to spend a lot of time with that. Again, for those listening that haven't gotten to that point with their parent, that those conversations or those boundaries in relationships have morphed, how do you encourage or help someone that's struggling to find a new parameter, so to speak, or a new relationship with their parent, because they're no longer a minor, a child, right, in that way, but they're an adult child to their parent? How do you maneuver? How can you give people advice on maneuvering in that way?
I think the biggest thing that has played a role in that for me has been transparency. Transparency about who I am, what I'm doing. And I think, fortunately and unfortunately, another big part of that is, your counterpart's willingness to understand. I can say without a doubt that my dad cares about and loves me very much. And so he was open to being taught these things and altering his perspective on a lot of things. So it's definitely a two-way street, but I really believe that it starts with transparency and being authentic, and just showing them who you are, because if you don't do that, they're not going to know any different. There's no chance that they're ever going to change. So that's where it started for me, and it's turned into a really good relationship, I think.
That's beautiful, and that to me, that's very inspiring. And as the whole saying goes, let it begin with me. It sounds like it started with you modeling what you needed, right, and kind of guiding in that way. And that is so beautiful, I think, to see, for me at least personally, to see, and it doesn't matter if it's academic or just out in the world, to see a young person maneuver from being a child to an adult, even within their family structure. Mm-hmm. And that's a beautiful thing. So I applaud you for being able to maneuver, because that, I know it's not stagnant. I know it's always has to change, but I applaud you all for being able to do that, because that can't be easy, even under the best circumstances.
Right.
But I want to know, how do you define persistence, and what are some of the characteristics? I know we talked a little bit about it being taught or learned, but what are some of the characteristics that you can perhaps encourage individuals to really focus on to sharpen their skills in that area?
I thought a little bit about this, and the definition of insanity is something like trying something over and over and expecting different results every time.
Mm-hmm.
I think persistence is really close to that, like trying something over and over, but the key difference is you're changing something. So you're continuing to strive for that goal and not getting discouraged when you don't get the results that you're looking for. So I think it's really similar to insanity in that way, which is kind of weird to think about.
I love that you put it that way, because it does feel that way sometimes, I think, for many of us. In your current position as a project manager, what are your challenges in being persistent?
So one of my responsibilities is acting as a liaison between our marketer, so external people who are selling Chevron product, the technical teams for that marketership, and then Chevron technical teams, and then also Chevron leadership. And it can be really challenging to communicate everything that's happening, because it's kind of like everyone is speaking a different language. And so if you're trying to get a point across, you have to cater what you're saying depending on what world your counterpart lives in, whether it's the business perspective or the technical perspective, because there's a different way to explain everything. So the challenge is making it so that there's a cohesive union between all of those moving parts, which can be challenging, to say the least. And it definitely requires a lot of patience and persistence. A big example is responsiveness. Like, I'll email someone 5 times and they won't respond to me for whatever reason, but I can't let that stop me from doing my job. So I have to continue trying to get in touch with them. That's just one small example, but yeah, it can be frustrating at times, but whenever you do get a win, whenever someone does cross the finish line for the project, it feels really, really good.
Yes. But you make that sound almost so easy, because it seems as though you utilizing your patience and communication, there has to be a level of self-awareness on your part, because as you're gauging and judging others of where they are, and not only the process of the project you're working on, but their temperament, how they're communicating with you. Are they progressing? Are they not? But you probably are having to evaluate yourself and making sure you're projecting, you're communicating. So what does self-awareness look like to you? And are you even aware of your own awareness?
I think I am a very self-aware person, and something that I've worked on and had to like really develop in my time as a project manager, and even in my previous role, is that just because someone is upset, it doesn't mean you did anything wrong. It doesn't say anything about your self-worth or how smart you are or how well you're doing your job. Sometimes people are just having a bad day and they're going to take it out on anybody. So I think keeping that in mind has been really helpful and really important. And kind of like the reverse of that is not letting my bad mood affect the way that I interact with people, because I'm trying to get people to work with me to achieve a goal. And so if I'm projecting something negative, or if my tone isn't supportive or encouraging, that really rubs off on people, and people can tell if something is wrong or if something's bothering you, if you're upset at them or just in general. So that's a really important part of not just being a project manager, but I think just being a human being, is being able to clock your place and your orientation and how you're interacting with the world.
I thank you for saying that. I think there are adults that don't have certain levels of self-awareness, for sure. I mean, we all can be guilty of that. But I think especially for young people, the sooner they understand the concept of self-awareness, the more lucky they may become.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I say that because not only is it about understanding how people are treating you, like you said, you're a perfect example of someone having a bad day doesn't necessarily mean it's about you, but also how we have influence over everyone around us, even though we may feel as though we do not.
Right.
But everyone has some type of effect on another. And being self-aware helps you to harness that, I would think.
Yep, absolutely. I think people are really good at reading energy.
Yes.
And so if you have negative energy, you might think you're hiding it, but people can tell. They can usually tell.
That's one of those universal languages.
Yeah.
Because it's before you even open your mouth, you walk into your room and people can feel it.
Right.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
I like that. I am trying to be aware of the time. I want to respect our time together. But as we begin to start looking toward a close, I am very interested in knowing what you've been reading lately or what you've read recently, because I think I'm under the impression, at least, that you used to or you do read quite a bit. Are there any interesting books or any interesting articles you've read lately?
Yes.
That you'd like to talk about?
I would love to talk about what I'm reading. I actually have a book club with my grandma, and we read a book a month, and that's been really nice in holding me accountable, because I used to love to read in junior high and high school, but then college kind of ruined it for me. Yes. And it took me a long time to get back into it. So having someone to report to, in a sense, helps keep me on track. But a lot of what we read this year were novels, fictional things.
You must have a very unique relationship with your grandmother.
Yeah.
Because how can the two of you have a book club? I would think that the interests may or may not be in alignment. So please tell me more. And then, yes, I want to know what you're reading.
Yeah. So my grandma, we are pretty close. She was an English teacher before she was retired. And so last year for Christmas, I was, thinking of what I could give her for Christmas. And I think I'm someone who prefers experiences over material things. And so I had this idea of doing a book club. It would be fun for me and would hold me accountable. And it would also give us an opportunity each month, time carved out to catch up and talk about something literary, because she reads all the time. She's retired. She has so much time. And so she has always been a reader. And so it was, she loved it, first of all, and she, every time we meet, says how much she loves it and how great of a gift it was. So it's been a really unique experience having that, and that's something that I want to continue every year. But yeah, we do have a really cool relationship. I'm her only granddaughter. And she actually used to live in Round Rock, which is a suburb of Austin. So whenever I wasn't swamped with school, I would escape to her house for a weekend. She lives in North Carolina now, so it's a little more difficult to see her physically, but with the book club, we're able to meet at least once a month. Usually we're late because of me, but it's at least once a month that we get to meet and catch up, and then also talk about what we're reading.
I love it. I love it. That is just completely beautiful. And so how do you make the selections, and what are you all reading?
Yeah. So whenever I was putting the list together, I basically just Googled books everyone should read, and picked the ones that I hadn't had a chance to read for the most part. And then also a couple of ones that I had read, classics, my favorites. And so we've read a lot of young adult fiction, because things that I never got to read in high school, like Catcher in the Rye, Slaughterhouse-Five. We also did some philosophy, meditations, and Walden, which I hated. But we got to read, or I got to reread The Count of Monte Cristo, which is my favorite book, and she had never read it before. And we both got to gush about how amazing it is and how great of a revenge story it is. Yeah, it's been really cool to be able to connect with her on that front. To finish off the year, we're doing A Tale of Two Cities, which is another favorite of mine, and also a favorite of hers that she hasn't read, and probably 30 years. So it's really cool to give her like the space to re-experience something and for us to also experience something for the first time together. Because that's kind of hard to find with someone like a grandparent who has so much more experience than you. It's really hard to experience something together for the first time. So it's a unique way to do that. And it's something that we both like to do. So it just kind of worked out really luckily. But a book that I recently finished was not part of book club is called Facing Codependence. And it was really eye-opening. And I was joking with my friends, like, I didn't read the book read me. I felt attacked in a lot of really weird ways. But it's something that speaks to like my journey of like self-growth and development. It was a really interesting read, and I'm really happy that I read it. I learned a lot for sure, but I'm happy to maybe take a break from self-reflection because I think I did enough of that for like 5 years in reading that book. So yeah, I'm excited to get back to novels for a little bit.
I love it. So as we begin to close out, I want to ask you, is there anything that you thought maybe we would chat about, but we haven't, that you really want to add to our conversation today?
I think something that like popped up for me the first time you brought this up, like several months ago, was like mental health. And I think that was something that I had in my back pocket. Yeah, I think it ties really closely to the idea of perseverance. The biggest thing on the forefront of mental health is depression, which is like a very good example of why persistence and perseverance is so important. Because if you lose the battle to depression, a lot of the time it means like you lose your life. So that's something that always has like, I don't want to say been important to me, but like something that I've considered in how I live my life. It's something that I've struggled with, and something that I really struggled with the obstacle that I faced of failing out of engineering school. But yeah, it's something that we continue to work on every day. I don't think it's something that ever really goes away, but I think that speaks to like the importance of, again, persistence and perseverance in your life.
Well, thank you for bringing that up, and I'm so glad that you did. That's always been a very important topic, but especially now through COVID and people not having the support systems, the networks as they once had, has really made it an issue that people are beginning to talk about more openly, and it seems a little bit more socially acceptable to talk about these things, but still, there are many that still come from the mindset that just toughen up.
Yeah.
It'll pass. Just get over it. All right? Just get over it. It'll pass. Just take care of your business. How do you, if you've ever come across a conversation like that or a statement like that, how can you enlighten someone? How can maybe the one that's making the comment, but even more importantly, the one that's hearing that comment, how can you provide support and provide a little insight for those that maybe because they haven't experienced it themselves, they think it's just about a matter of grit, just toughen up.
Yeah.
It'll pass.
Yeah, a really good analogy that, or lens through which to see it that I learned in psychology is thinking about it for what it is, an illness. When you think about someone who has high blood pressure, what do you do to treat high blood pressure? You exercise, you eat well, you take a medication potentially. If someone has a hard time understanding like what depression is and how it can affect you, I always like to bring up, again, what it is exactly. It's a chemical imbalance in your brain, and it's not really something that you have control over necessarily. There are things you can do to improve how you feel in your mood, but ultimately, if it's something that's generational or hereditary, again, it's not really something that you can just kind of push through. And I think that that's, again, something that people are starting to realize with like the pandemic and just like the general spotlight that's been put on mental health in the last couple of years. But that's whenever I was struggling with like coming to grips with having depression, that way of thinking is what helped me. It's like, If someone has a broken leg, you go to the doctor to treat it. If someone has high blood pressure, you take medication to treat it. It's the same thing with your brain. Like if something's wrong, you have to treat it, and it's not just something that you can power through necessarily.
Thank you. Thank you for that. That's really an important addition to our conversation because it's very timely. And I know that many of us have struggled with situations that are similar, circumstances that are similar. So thank you for that. And again, if you have any resources that you can share with us, perhaps we can share it with our audience.
Yeah.
But one final note, again, before we close out, I want to know, for those listening, do you have any recommendations? Christmas is coming. And maybe it may be for their grandmother, it may be a friend, it may be for self. Do you have any book recommendations for over the holidays?
Ooh. Let me just go through my mental checklist of things that I've read recently.
It doesn't even have to be recent. Maybe it's just some of your all-time favorites.
The one that I mentioned earlier, The Count of Monte Cristo, is an all-time favorite. If you like revenge, if you like love, twists and turns, adventure, this book has it all. And it is really big, and it seems like a tough read, but Alexandre Dumas has a way with words, and it's the type of book that you can't really put down and you get through relatively quickly. As far as some light, easy breezy reading, Catcher in the Rye was good. The Bell Jar, which I kind of like to think of it as its like female counterpart. The Bell Jar is also really good, and it's relatively short and really light, and puts a lot of things into perspective and has elements of comedy, but also like self-reflection too. I think I'm realizing that I read a lot of heavier things, not necessarily light, easy, breezy.
And that's okay. And that's okay.
Yeah. I'll stick with those.
Well, I love it. I love it. Thank you so much. And to our audience, we're so happy and so proud to have Sabrina with us today. And I hope you've taken the time to listen to this entire conversation. If you haven't, please do. And for all of our other conversations, I hope you listen in, hear more about our guests. But as we close out today, let's be like Sabrina. Let's appreciate experiences over things, especially this holiday season. Find a good book. Have a great day.